The bus rolled to a stop with a long sigh of brakes, and Daniel stepped down onto the familiar cracked pavement of his hometown. The air smelled different here, cleaner, warmer, touched with the faint scent of pine and wood smoke. It had been 11 years since he'd last walked this street, back when he was a fresh-faced 22-year-old with a duffel bag, a sharp salute, and the world ahead of him. Now, at 33, his shoulders carried more than gear. They carried years of sand, sweat, and shadows that only soldiers understood. The main street looked almost frozen in time. The same diner sat on the corner with its neon, open, sign flickering in the window. Old Mr. Carson still swept the sidewalk in front of the hardware store, moving slow but steady. A couple of kids zipped past on their bikes, laughing in a way Daniel hadn't heard in years, a pure, carefree sound. People noticed him as he passed. Some looked twice, some smiled knowingly, and a few called his name, their voices filled with surprise and warmth. His boots crunched against the gravel as he turned down the road toward his parents' house. Each step seemed to bring a memory rushing back, the night before he shipped out, when his mom had cried quietly in the kitchen, the way his dad had clasped his shoulder, pride in his eyes but a heaviness behind it. He remembered his little sister's tear-streaked face as she handed him a drawing she'd made, saying, "So you don't forget me." He hadn't forgotten a thing. The white two-story house came into view, the front porch sagging just a little more than before, the paint peeling in places. The big oak tree still stood in the yard, though its branches seemed lower, like it, too, had aged in his absence. Daniel stopped at the gate, his heart thudding harder than it ever had in combat. This was the moment he had pictured countless times while lying in dusty tents or staring out over foreign mountains, the moment he came home. He pushed the gate open, and the familiar squeak it made almost broke him. His mother was sitting on the porch swing, a blanket around her shoulders. She looked up, and for a heartbeat, her face was blank with disbelief. Then the blanket slipped from her grip, and she was on her feet, running toward him. "Danny." Her voice cracked as she wrapped her arms around him, clutching him like she'd never let go again. "Hey, Ma," he said softly, his voice catching. She pulled back just far enough to look at him, her eyes scanning every inch of his face as if to memorize it all over again. "You're really here. You're really home." The screen door creaked open, and his father stepped out. Time had etched deeper lines in his face, and his hair was more silver than brown now. He didn't rush forward like his mother had, he just stood there for a second, his hands in his pockets, his jaw tight. Then, slowly, he walked up to Daniel and gripped his hand firmly before pulling him into a hug. "Good to see you, son," he said, his voice low and thick. Before Daniel could answer, a high-pitched squeal came from the doorway. His sister, no longer the kid he remembered but a grown woman, came barreling down the steps. "Oh my God, you're back," she shouted, nearly knocking him over with her hug. They all stood there for a moment in a tangled circle of arms and tears, the kind of reunion that words could never really describe. Inside, everything felt the same yet different. The furniture was familiar, but the colors seemed a little more faded. There were new pictures on the walls, his sister in a cap and gown, his parents at a family barbecue he'd missed. On the mantel was a photo of him in uniform, younger and unscarred. They sat around the kitchen table, the smell of coffee and fresh pie filling the air. His mother asked about his health, what he ate overseas, if he had enough warm clothes. His sister peppered him with questions about the countries he'd seen, the people he'd met. His father mostly listened, sipping his coffee and watching his son as if making sure he was real. Daniel told them some of his stories, funny moments with his unit, the time they'd tried to cook Thanksgiving dinner in the middle of the desert, the camaraderie that made the worst days bearable. He left out the darker chapters, the friends who didn't make it home, the nights filled with noise and fear, the weight that never truly lifts. Those were things he would carry silently. As the afternoon faded into evening, neighbors began stopping by. Mrs. Turner brought a homemade casserole. Mr. Briggs, the retired Marine from down the street, gave Daniel a firm handshake and a knowing nod. The house buzzed with voices and laughter, and for the first time in years, Daniel felt something settle in his chest, a piece he hadn't realized he'd been missing. Later, after the guests had gone and his parents had gone to bed, Daniel stepped outside. The air was crisp, and the sky stretched wide above him, scattered with stars that seemed brighter than any he'd seen overseas. He leaned against the porch railing, listening to the quiet hum of his hometown. He thought about all the places he'd been, the battles fought, the friends lost, and the long nights when home had felt like a dream too far away. Now, standing here, he realized something important. Coming back wasn't just about crossing miles. It was about finding the parts of yourself you'd left behind. The screen door creaked again, and his mom appeared with 2 mugs of coffee. "Couldn't sleep?" she asked, handing him one. "Not used to the quiet," he said with a small smile. She sat beside him, wrapping her blanket tighter. "Well, get used to it, Danny. You're home now." He looked out at the dark street, the familiar houses, the old oak tree swaying gently in the breeze. For the first time in a long time, he believed her. Home. It was more than just a place. It was this porch, this night, these people. And no matter how far he'd gone or how many years had passed, it was the one thing he'd always come back to.